This is the city. Los Angeles, California. I work here.
Today we're with the police chief, used to be police chief of LAPD. 38 years of community service. Bernard Parks is one of a kind. You can't find anybody like this probably if you went out and tried to. He's had a history with, as I said, 34 years with LAPD as a cop all the way up to chief, and then on to chief, and then now he's in the political ring with in District 8 of the city of Los Angeles. And there's thoughts that he might be seriously wanting to be the mayor of Los Angeles. So we first of all want to just thank you very much, and I'm going to call you Chief Parks if that's not too much of an insult.
No.
And we do want to say thank you so much for joining us on the Cutting Edge today. And I guess what we want to do is, if you don't mind, we want to do a little retrospective because nobody knows about Chief Parks. You've just been out there in front of everybody for so long, nobody probably had the chance to ask you some questions. And now, you were born in Beaumont, Texas. When did you come to Los Angeles?
So I was born in Beaumont in December of '43, and my family moved to Los Angeles in February '44.
So you're a real California kid.
That's right.
Grew up right here in Los Angeles.
The east side of Los Angeles, south side of Los Angeles, and the west side.
Okay, now a couple interesting things. You attended parochial school, several, I guess, and you played sports.
That's right.
And one of the things that interested us particularly was the fact that you played football.
That's true.
All right, what did you play in? For what team did you play, and what position did you play?
Well, I played all the way through grade school. I was in parochial school for 12 years, St. Patrick's till the 7th grade, and Holy Spirit for my 8th grade, and then St. John Vianney for high school. So I did 12 years of parochial school. I played football and ran track primarily. In football, I played offense and defensive end.
All right. Now, one thing that happened to you when you turned at 20 years old, after going through school, your dad was a police officer. Is that
right.
correct?
He was a police officer for the city's harbor department.
All right. Now, was he? One of the questions that came up in our conversation was he a police officer back in Texas?
No. This is his entire law enforcement career was in Los Angeles or in the state of California.
My goodness. Okay, so it's what is it? February of 1965.
February '65, came on the police department. Graduated April '65.
All right. Now, one of the things that's so important, you can't be in law enforcement that many years without having known where all the bodies are buried. And I mean, I mean that probably metaphorically as well as actually. It's unbelievable that you spend that much time with the very prestigious Los Angeles Police Department. One of the famous TV shows that we happen to like a lot was Police Story.
Yes.
And now, did you have any input on that show, or did you?
Well, the Police Story, we had several. They had Dragnet, Adam 12 were the ones that came out first, and then we had LAPD Live. Now, Police Story, I did not have any involvement in, but LAPD Live was one that we helped in the department. Came about when I was chief, and we developed the lines for it. We developed the prototypes and also the guidelines of the things we thought would be important to show the public.
Now, one of the things is, in modern day parlance, is you've got 911 and you got cops and you've got all these shows on television. Now, we want to know it from the source. What does the 52nd, as a matter of fact, the 52nd Chief of Police of California of LAPD think of those shows?
Well, I think they give a snapshot of what goes on in police work, but it doesn't come close to saying what the entire job of a police officer. It takes snippets of probably the most physically active parts, because that's good for TV, but it doesn't show the impact that the police make on communities. It doesn't show how police officers relate to youth as it relates to youth programs. In fact, when we did LAPD Live, one of the stipulations we insisted on was that it wasn't going to be a run, gun, and shoot type of show. It wasn't going to be where you just pull out pursuits and you showed this activity. And that collage of activity, although it's good for TV watching, does not represent what an officer's day is about. So that's why on LAPD Live you see a much larger variety of what officers do, and you follow them through the day and you see the actual activities that are going on. So I think it gives a misimpression that on cops and some of those shows that that's the way the police officers' lives are every minute of the day. That would be far too exhaustive, and you could not keep up that pace if every officer had that kind of activity. They pick out of thousands of hours of tape, they pick out enough to put a show together, and they pick the most action-oriented portions.
Now let's move on here. We've got so much to cover in this brief period of time with you, and we're honored to have you with us. As I said again, because you know so much that could be helpful to our society, and especially to Los Angeles, California. So because there's watchers all over on the cutting edge, all over the world that will watch this show. Let me ask you this: what was your driving energy to be the chief of police of this city? What was your motivation? Who was your mentor, or let's say?
Well, I had several mentors. When I came on the police department, a number of people took me under their wing. We had the first black captain, first black commander, Homer Broom, Joe Rozan, who I worked with for a number of years. We had George Lewis. We also had Ed Henry. We also had people that Pete Nelson, variety of people, Bob Rock, all found a way to help me through my career. But I think the greatest motivation I received was that every one of them had a view that police work was about service. And as I went through the ranks, I found out that you could make more of an impact and you can serve more the higher levels that you're at. And then I found out from talking to a variety of people that what you had to do to study and be successful in the process. And my success has always been that I was able to read the material, comprehend it, and write real well. At that time, minorities didn't get very good orals, and so you had to do it with, as we said, with the pencil. And so I was successful in going through the ranks with the exam process. But it wasn't until I became a deputy chief in about 1988 that I really seriously thought that being chief of police was a reality. Before that, it was a kind of a dream, and you thought about it periodically, but it wasn't until I became a deputy chief and you realize that the people that you work with at the chief level, they were not necessarily more advanced than you were. They didn't have any better education. They didn't have any better grasp on the issues. And so you begin to realize that it could be a reality, but also you realize it's a timing issue. And before I became chief, we'd only had, I think, 4 chiefs in about 40 years. So it wasn't that they didn't have people that were eligible or that would have been good chiefs. It's just that the opportunity did not come forth. And so I had the opportunity, unlike others, to where I actually competed for chief twice. And because generally at that point in time in your career, you're either moving on or you're getting ready to retire. It's not something you're around long enough to compete 2 or 3 times. But I was successful the second time, and it was a great 5 years of being chief of police.
So let's get to the chaser on that one too, because how much effort did Mayor Reardon at the time have in placing you in that position?
Well, Mayor Reardon was the person that made this selection after my name was presented by the police commission. So he's the person that basically made that final decision. And so I've always been grateful to him for having that kind of confidence. And with him, we had 4.5 to 5 great years of putting things together that made this city safer. And during Mayor Reardon's tenure as mayor, I don't know if this is a record, but we had almost 100 consecutive months of crime reduction. And so crime went down almost 50% in almost every category. And so it was a great time in the sense of the city's history as relates to safety.
Everyone says, Chief Parks, I mean, you're so self-deprecating, and you're just a handsome guy, and you California guy, and you raise your family here and all this stuff. And but all they will say about you is that you're a lot more wily a politician than people might think that you are. And I guess I got to say that you don't make it to chief without having some pretty strong political skills.
Well, I think we used to always say inside the department that you were in small p politics, that you were not in partisan politics. but you certainly have to know the lay of the land. You have to understand the dynamics in communities. You have to know who the people are that are going to make those decisions, and you hopefully have a track record that's appealing to them. One thing I think that people make mistakes on these types of jobs is they think you run for them, or all of a sudden you just appear and you start competing. People are making their decisions about you for as long as they know you. And so if they don't respect you as a sergeant or lieutenant, all of a sudden they're not going to respect you because you're competing for chief. So you have to have I think, a long career and a history of performance. You have to be able to articulate about different issues. You have to have some following throughout the city, and that requires you to be out in the communities. And I used to always tell people that it's too late to ask people for a favor when you're just introducing yourself. So those that are going to make an impact on your life, you need to know who they are and know about them well in advance before that decision is made.
Okay, one of the questions also is that now you probably will not answer this. I mean, I'm planning on you not answering it, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
All right.
Now, Willie Williams took over before you as chief, and I was going to. This is kind of a two-part question. One is, were you shocked to find out that when you get up into that rarefied air at that level, that you're going to have political problems with maybe your other fellow cops at that point in time?
No, I think one of the things that when the city of LA took away the civil service requirements for chief of police, it became apparent it was going to be far more political than it's ever been before. Also, understanding the era that we're in as far as Rodney King and a riot, there was a general perception in the city, not based on merit, but that there was a need for an outside chief. And so it was pretty well written that this is the effort in where they were going to go. And although when I competed in that exam, I think it was 1 point difference between myself and Willie Williams, it was pretty clear where they were going. Unfortunately, when they made the decision, they didn't tell anybody. Most of us that were competing read about it in the newspaper, saw it on television, and that was one of the unfortunate things, that the commission did not take the opportunity to advise those that were participating.
Okay, now we got to skip some space here, because we got to bring it up to modern days, because we're going to have to deal with some certain political realities and issues at this point in time. To make a long story short, you then became chief, and you wound up after the first 5 years not being re-up because you got a new mayor.
That's right.
Mayor Hahn. And evidently there's no, as they say in the trade, no love lost between you and Mayor Hahn at this point in time. I mean, you've kind of downplayed that in all of the writings and so on, but let's just say that it's probably at an arm's length that you're dealing with the mayor at this point in time. Otherwise, you may not have decided to run for mayor.
Well, no, I think what the real issue, and I try to keep everybody on the subject, and everybody likes the intrigue of the personalities and such. But I think the real reality is that in looking at this city, certainly I had some options. I could have retired, and I did, but I could have stayed retired. But I think there's so many ways you can serve the city, and I have never dedicated my life to anything negative. So it's not, as people have talked about, whether you're trying to get back at this person or that person. I was fortunate enough to run for office, ended up with almost 80% of the vote. But what's more important to me than the 80% was that I was able to get about 10,000 more people out to vote than had voted in the past. But in making the decision about running for mayor, it's been based on what I think is the lack of performance of the existing mayor, not an issue saying, again, that you're getting back, but looking at the record or the non-existence of a record.
Well, let's point at those things out right now. What are those things that you find that make you determined to run in this race?
Well, the things I've seen is that there's been a lack of leadership on some of our basic issues. The city has very little coherent policies as it relates to whether it's traffic or housing or criminal justice. It just appears that it reacts to a lot of things. One of the things that first clued me as far as identifying this leadership issue was that during a recent article on behalf of the mayor that the LA Times was doing, they asked him what he had accomplished in his first 2 years. And when you read the list of accomplishments, most of them were non-existent or they were in process, so nothing had ever been achieved. But what was so glaring in the article is when they asked him what was he going to achieve in his next 2 years, and he said, "Don't look for anything big for me." And I thought that was very remarkable for a person that's in the second largest city in America to say the mayor's office should not be a big thinker, or mayor's office should not be being looked at for larger accomplishments in the future. Then I watched over the last year as it related to last year's budget and some of the things that were being done and how poorly they were handled. And we begin to look at how the LAX had been mismanaged, and then corruption scandals with the grand jury from the county and the federal grand jury. And then, you begin to look at this and you realize, as I've talked to about 600 people in the last month at these little chats that I put together, that they have come to the conclusion that there's a need of change in the city. They believe the city's adrift, that lacks leadership, and they don't see where the city is going or whether it's connected to anything.
You're not alone in this race, though. You have Bob Hertzberg from the Valley.
That's right.
You've got Antonio Villagrosa. You've got Richard Alarcon. You've got the mayor himself. You've got some big players along with a lot of little ones in addition that are running in this race.
Yeah.
So what makes you think that you could do something better than, let's say, and what's so funny about this, as we were preparing for this show today, what we noticed is you've got a black candidate, you got two Latino candidates, you've got a Jewish candidate, you got a white candidate. I mean, we're only missing an Asian candidate to make to make this a really funny election.
Yeah, one thing, and Antonio hasn't announced yet, but everybody's speculating about him. But I think what you find in the candidate pool, that it represents what the city of LA is. It's the most diverse city in the world. We have 100 plus languages spoken here. But I think when we look at this city, it depends on who can resonate with the larger groups of people. It's clear that there's going to have to be coalitions at a variety of levels. You cannot look, as it was in the Bradley days, it said blacks in the Jewish community get together and you end up with a mayor for 20 years. Those special interest groups certainly have to be attended to, but there's far more minorities and smaller groups that you have to be able to be sensitive to. We think of the Asian American groups, but within that Asian American group, you have the Chinese, you have the Koreans, you have the Japanese, and they don't all support the same things. And then within the Hispanic community, you have North Americans, Central Americans, you have Cubans, that we throw them all into one hat, but there are a variety of subgroups. Another fairly important group in the city of LA that has not gotten a lot of attention is the African group. That in fact we have at this time, of all places, on Fairfax Boulevard, area called Little Nigeria. And so these are things that are happening in our community that we have not, many of us that have been sensitive to it understand it. Many have not given it the attention that's needed. But it's pretty clear that anyone that's going to be successful in this city in the future is the person that can develop, live with, and understand coalitions, not just to pull enough votes together to get elected, but clearly pulling together groups that can work in concert with each other and understand that we can have a joint effort to make the city better.
And on that issue, all of the candidates are talking about a $2.25 million cap on a voluntary cap on their spending for this campaign. The chances are that if Mayor Hahn gets nervous, you might have to raise $5 million to compete with him.
Well, I think my candidacy is a little different than others. I come in it with a significant name recognition. Most of it's positive, citywide exposure. And so I don't have to, as other candidates have to do, is go raise a bunch of money just to become known. And then once you're known, be able to convince people to vote. I start off with that name recognition. So I view it differently. And I think there's also, in polling and such, you have the ability to identify what communities and where you can put most of your emphasis. I think all the candidates have a certain groups that have interest in them, but the key is who's going to be able to move beyond their support groups, who's going to be able to move beyond their base and pull together votes. But again, not just to get votes, but able to then work within that framework once you're elected to satisfy the needs of the community.
Now you're talking like a politician, Chief Parks, and I have to
Public
mention
servant.
it. Yeah, that's true. Well, you've done your public service. There's no doubt about that. But I must say though, you're talking a little bit like a politician here in that regard, because there's some other realities. One is that the state of California is cutting back what they're giving to the cities and communities all throughout the state. We got a pension spiking thing that's out of possible hand. You got more people retiring and drawing money on part of that budget that you have to pay every year than you have money to operate your budget on.
That's right.
So there's some real realities involved. Also, on top of that, you've got outsourcing, taking jobs out of this country to begin with, moving them to foreign countries, and you're sitting here trying to develop jobs and create an economic development zone to make things happen here. So all I'm saying to you is, what are you going to do? What can you do with those restrictions, those thoughts in mind? You got the state against you, you got outsourcing going on, you got other things. How do you overcome those things?
Well, number one, I think there's not one problem that the state has presented to us that we couldn't predict it. We have seen over time workers' comp. Everyone knew workers' comp was out of control for 10 years. It wasn't until the new governor came in that people had the wherewithal to deal with it. That has been a problem because of a lack of leadership. Plus, it's been a problem because many special interest groups wanted to continue to add on benefits. The other issue is that we've not shown a will as a elected body often to cut costs when we needed to. Unfortunately, even in this city, while we're going through the process of cutting our budget on tree trimming or cutting our budget on alley cleanup or street maintenance, at the same time we're giving significant raises to employees. So we're sending a message to the public that we're going to raise your fees, we're going to raise your taxes, and then we're going to cut your services, and then we're going to reward employee groups. That is not the message that the public wants to hear, and they don't understand it. Most people are willing to pay more if they see at minimum their services are maintained or they increase. But they're not willing to pay more and get less service and then be told that $50 million of the city's current budget this year is set aside just for raises for employees. So I think we have to begin to turn that cycle. We have to find also a way to cut this, what we call a structural deficit. And that deficit, structural deficit, is a nice way of saying we have to stop spending more than we bring in. And at this point in our budget, that hasn't even gone in place yet, July 1st, our new budget comes in. We're $300 million in the hole if we spend all the money that's in the budget and we collect all the money we project. And so we eventually going to have to come to grips of cutting personnel to match what our budgets reflect. In the state budget, it's in billions of dollars. In the city, it's down to several $100 million. That's the hard decisions, and that's where leadership comes in, to where you cannot put together a budget, satisfy everyone, and continue to create havoc within the very community that's looking for you to provide the services. The other thing that we can do far better than we're doing now, and that is that we can spend the money in our budget more within our city confines to help generate funds from our tax base to where we spend money with our businesses. We find ways to cut business tax, but we also got to make sure that when the city does business, their priority is to deal with the businesses in the city. Another revenue stream that we've not looked at and we need to begin to look at is cable TV. The more that we can encourage people to go to cable in addition to their network TV, the more revenue the city gets. The more that we make sure that the cable TVs present services that the community wants, again, more revenue the city.
But one of the things on that particular issue is broadband, that is not even part of any cable agreement with any city that we know of.
Yeah.
And that's an area where they're getting lots of revenue. The cable companies are getting lots of revenue from broadband connections, and now telephone. You're getting that trifecta effect along with your cable's choices. And the point is, how much of that should the city of Los Angeles get, considering how many broadband users you have in this city?
Well, I think what we're going to be coming across is very shortly the city's going through their renewal process for the 6 or 7 cable companies. All of those pieces of the puzzle need to be on the table to define what is a fair share for the city. But we also have to be aware of is that there are many court decisions that are competing as to what is a cable service versus what is a telephone service, and we have to make sure that we're not in conflict with them. But the other area that we need to be aware of is satellite. Satellite is taking significant revenue away from cable. At the same time, the city gets no revenue from satellite. So there's a need to look towards a way in which the state can give the cities a law in which they can say you can tax the satellite companies. I put a motion in about that several months ago. And some states have already done it where you charge satellite about 5%. That then basically replaces the revenue you lose from the cable industry.
But they're gonna just raise the satellite rates then in order to make up for the difference.
Well,
aren't they?
I think the issue is that you're losing revenue from cable. The only way you replace it is go to the source that's taking that revenue. Plus, I think as we look to the future, we know that there's going to be a significant increase of population in the state of California and in the city of LA. We need to be thinking now for 15 years from now as to where we are on transportation. What is that going to be our coherent housing plan? The fact that we lose jobs because of costs, because of taxes, because of workers' comp, and we have basically sent a great deal of our businesses into Arizona and other places. We need to find a way to recover them. The movie industry, which we're known for, we lose considerable amount of trade in other cities, other countries. We need to evaluate how and why those businesses are leaving and find a way to nurture them back into this environment. Because without them, we're going to be a city and eventually a state that has little to offer. Because with the electronics and the variety of ways businesses are done today, you don't have to be in Los Angeles. You can be on the hub, you can be on the peripheral of Los Angeles in another state and electronically do the same business here in the state of California or the city of Los Angeles. We've not paid attention to a lot of those issues, and we need to. And one of the things that's unfortunate as we go through this financial crisis, at the same time, our city has been judged to be the most illiterate any time in its history. Our lack of education, our lack of ability to get our kids through school. That now sends a message to businesses, don't go and build in the city of LA because you got to come on with additional costs. And that cost is to educate your workforce. So we have a variety of things that we can do to help ourselves, but we've not shown the creative will to do it.
Larry.
Yeah, I want to jump in. Thank you very much for seeing us, Councilmember Parks. You had a resolution on AB 1417 in which it states LA has the highest rate of undereducated adults of any major metropolitan city in the nation. I think you just touched on that. That being the case, has Superintendent Romer been effective in raising the level of achievement in our public schools?
You know, he's done a good job, at least from my district, on K through 6, where our kids have raised their scores remarkably. The dilemma is that even with that raise in scores, none of my schools reach citywide average. So we've come a long way, but we have a lot to do. Plus, middle schools and high schools are not even on the chart. So we're going to have to find, in the interim, what and how do you impact the 6th graders as they go all the way to 12th grade? And then what do you do with the current 6th graders to 12th grade and as it relates to their lack of educational achievement so that we do not graduate 2 or 3 generations of kids into the job market with little or no skills?
You know, we did a program on No Child Left Behind in your city, or in the county anyway, and accountability is one of the things that we're pushing for, and you know, I would just hope that that's having some kind of an effect. I think we've read that they're somehow watering down some of the test requirements because they realize that the children are not, you know, cutting the mustard as of yet, but hopefully that'll change.
See, that's the reverse of what we should do. Instead of cutting the scores, we should keep the scores up and educate the kids better. We're very supportive of the charter schools. In fact, we're going to have 2 new charter schools open up in the 8th district between now and the start of next school year. That seems to be a hope where kids can go to a charter school. They're not under the bureaucratic process of LA Unified, but the results seem to be there at the places we need them. At the high school level, where our current high schools appear to be dysfunctional, we can then begin to look at some of these other charter schools and fill the void.
Okay, we're going to have to go into sort of a lightning round thing here because there's so many issues
Let me jump in, Ron.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but you serve on the Public Safety Committee?
Yes.
And I guess one question might be, what policy positions have you proposed that were approved and implemented?
As far as the basically on dealing with the public safety, I've not necessarily proposed any policies, but we certainly have evaluated and looked at the policies within the police department that come forward. We've also looked at ways in which we can fund things that support the police department, one of which was the gang program. We were instrumental in putting another $1 million into the gang program this year to deal with prevention, intervention, and education. But my role on the public safety has been more at looking at legislation that I think we should be supporting in Sacramento and in the federal government, and then looking at the issues that come forward, whether it's consent decree, policy changes within the department, to give some insight to the committee before it becomes a final issue. But where I've put most of my time in is looking at educational issues that we brought forth, or dealing with AIDS issues, the kinds of things that impact the 8th district is where we put the greatest amount of our attention.
Let me say that of all the candidates, including the mayor, I think you have far and above the amount of knowledge that they have with respect to crime and public safety. Everybody says it's job one, but you did it. You walked the talk. We read that total violent crimes are down 15% from last year. However, homicides and rapes have increased, and there have been nearly 50,000 violent crimes in 2003. That being said, are the community summits having an impact on reducing crime and gang violence?
Well, I think one of the things we have to be careful about the crime stats. The crime stats, when you hear people trumpet that 2003 crime is down, but at the same time they never say that it went up significantly in 2002. So even with the drop in 2003, we don't know whether we're even back to where we were in 2001. And so the issue is that we know that if you look at 3 years that Mayor Hahn's been in office, 2001, 2, and 3, that crime over those 3 years has gone up significantly compared to the 3 years before he got in office. So we can look at that as a trend and know that this goal of having the safest big city in America is not on the right path. And so you can't look at crime stats in the smallest level. You have to look at them over a trend. And we know for a fact that from 92 to 99 or 2000, when Richard Riordan was in office, you can go back and find remarkably an 8-year period of time that crime went down month after month after month, and where you had 40% decreases in homicide. In 99 and 98, the city of LA had just over 400 homicides each year. You have to go back to the 1960s to find numbers that small. But I think what we have to look at is, as opposed to the imagery that's going on today in the city about crime in this very narrow scope, you have to go back and look at it 3 to 5 years and see what you've really done. But the neighborhoods, to answer your question, the neighborhoods are absolutely essential to be functional for long-term crime reduction. The police can't do it by themselves. No one can do it by themselves. It's only when the community takes an active role, or standards set within a community, that makes an impact on crime.
Has Chief Bratton added volunteer civilians to assist, as back in the old days when Daryl Gates did that? Or
No, what I've seen in this administration is basically a throwback kind of operation to where we're into major task forces, generating more arrest numbers. This is the mode that the LAPD was in the late 80s, early 90s, when we had hammer task forces. But most of everything you hear about from LAPD is dealing with enforcement-generated kinds of operation. You hear little or no information about prevention, intervention, and education. In fact, they just dismantled the DARE program in this budget year. Yet we've heard for years, what is the absolute necessity is young people get a chance to have a relationship with the police officer that's non-law enforcement. And where do we get that emphasis about anti-drugs, anti-violence, and anti-gangs, except from the DARE program? So we see a lot of that preventive type of measures going by the wayside, but yet we see a great deal of emphasis on the enforcement side.
Okay, we're gonna have to really move here, because one of the things we got to get about 4 or 5 real big items. Number one was the Valley succession. What was your position on that?
I was opposed to secession because I truly believe that the city can provide the service if it truly had the leadership that's required.
What are you going to do for the Valley if you're elected mayor?
Well, first of all, what I'm going to do for the Valley is to ensure that we're not going to dance on their grave after an election. I think I want to find a way to get the same energy that created secession into working as a city and as a part of the city to bring about a better change. But the Valley needs certain things, and I think they've argued the wrong point for years. They always are concerned about more resources. But what they don't have that makes sure resources there, they do not have city structures that ensure that it brings resources. So when you're out debating about how many police officers, you're going to get your fair share. But if you do, as we're going to see in the near future, where you add 2 more police stations, that's an automatic increase in resources and services.
They're concerned about their trash though. They say they hate the trash dump over there, and they hate not getting their trash picked up.
Well, the trash dump is a big issue, and just like every council district, it has a citywide issue within every council district. I have the Coliseum, which is a citywide issue. But one of the things I think everyone wants to see the trash dump close, but at what cost? And until you find a critical analysis of what the cost is going to be to close it, where you're going to take this trash, how much more expensive is going to take to move it to that location, you can't just make an arbitrary decision and say Sunshine Canyon is going to be closed in 2006, because we may not be able to afford the bill that is going to come in. We need to do this in a comprehensive way and say, if the goal is to close it, what is the timetable and what is it going to cost? And then how do you pay for it? Because it's not going to come without cost. But yet we see people only dealing with half the equation.
Okay, skipping down to Hollywood. Now we're talking about Hollywood and the redevelopment zone there. It's supposed to go on until 2016. $34 million. It doesn't seem like a lot of money to spend on Hollywood. Seems like you might want to spend more. What's your position on that?
I think what I've seen on the economic development, in fact, I was just at the Kodak Theater last night, and I think many of those things, including the rail system, are all enhancements to Hollywood. You go out and you see the streets are filled with people that are visiting. But what I think people are upset with in Hollywood is that they want to see more remarkable turnover quicker. But I think we have to realize where Hollywood has come from. It wasn't 8 to 9 years ago that it was a place that nobody would go to. Now you're beginning to see this come back, and you're beginning to see housing there. And the only way that you're going to make any community work is to bring business and housing and transportation and that complement each other. Now that you have the rail system, you have lofts, you have buildings going up, and now you're seeing refurbishment of the older buildings to maintain the Hollywood effect. But it is going to be a long time coming, because it didn't deteriorate overnight. It deteriorated over decades. Now it's going to take decades to bring it back. But I think CRA has done a good job so far.
NFL team, wait a minute. We're talking to the Coliseum thing now. University of Southern California has #1 team in the nation. Okay, 83,000 people are trying to get into that stadium that once held 102,000 back in 1932. The new Coliseum Commission said that the NFL wanted a 60,000 seat stadium with all these skyboxes they could sell big money for.
Yeah.
So what's your position on this?
Well, first of all, the numbers are wrong. At one time, there was a stadium designed for 60+ thousand. The NFL has increased that. We support it at 78. If you go back and look at USC's figures for the last several decades, they have not averaged 78,000 people ever. And so what we're looking for is to, at this time, negotiate with USC, to negotiate with NFL and bring NFL football back to the city, because it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it will create multi-million dollars of development, not just in the stadium, a $400 million stadium, but millions of dollars around the stadium.
Is there a bidding war with Pasadena and Carson on this issue?
Well, you know what's interesting? It's not a bidding war, and that's what upsets the NFL. They would love to see a bidding war, but Pasadena has not received confirmation on a stadium design. They've not gone forward on an environmental impact. And recently, Carson was purchased by a private developer that is going to build a commercial shopping center. So that at this point, the only site in this region that has an environmental impacts report, has a stadium design that's been approved, has a term sheet from the NFL, is the Coliseum. And we feel that with that we're going to have a great chance of having this $400 million stadium, and then bringing a team to Los Angeles that will be a 200-300 member business that will bring significant revenue for housing, cars, schools, and all the things that go around.
Are you going to make it more convenient to park and more convenient to get there?
We have already, we have the largest amount of parking than most stadiums. We have 20-some-odd thousand parking places with the Coliseum and USC. And the Coliseum just built a 2,200 spot parking place in the Expo Park. We put, I think, over $1 billion of development in the park in the last 10 years. So the park is not what people remember it to be back in what they say the old days. It is a viable location in which the Science Center, just since it's been open, has had 8 million visitors in that facility, which is part of that park.
Okay,
Ron, I would
forum.
like to see, I'm going to cut
Okay.
you off, Ron. We do this all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned CRA earlier on the redevelopment agency, and I recognize that there was blight in Michigan, in Los Angeles. Let's talk about the Bunker Hill project. There's 123 million set aside for that. A couple of years ago, because we have the data, the bonded indebtedness for the city of LA was in excess of $2 billion. Now it's down to about 1.3. Does this project meet your vision for LA's revitalization, and has it created the expectations that you have for good-paying jobs?
Well, see, I think, well, first of all, I think it's created part of the expectation, because what CRA does, in my understanding, is it creates an environment for other development to go on. And when you see what Bunker Hill has done, and then now you see Staples coming in, now you see the, stores and streets and lofts and restaurants. That was the crux of getting all that moving, was this CRA development. CRA was never developed to be a revenue generation in the sense of CRA making money. It was to invest to allow that money to be the catalyst for development in the community. So I think it's taken a while to catch on, but we see wonderful things going on in downtown now.
I got to come back to the Staples Center because I used to have season tickets at the Forum. We moved the Lakers from one place to another. What's happening with the Forum today?
Well, the Forum is now one of our biggest churches in California. In fact, Los Angeles is now the home of 3 of the largest black churches in America: West Angeles, and also Crenshaw Christian Center, and then also Bishop Ulmer's church that's currently in Inglewood now at the Forum. But it also puts on other events in addition to being a location for the church on a weekly basis.
What happened to that issue about, that was supposed to be a mall, it was supposed to be a redeveloped area?
That's the area. That's the
Inglewood.
area that's in Inglewood, south
Right.
of the Forum.
Right.
And basically, it was set up to house about 2,000 jobs, but yet it was voted down overwhelmingly by the public because of this issue of Walmart coming in, and the public was fed information in which they chose not to have Walmart as part of it. And it's unfortunate to some degree because there is no alternative. So they have this several acre plot of land that has not been developed, and there's no plans to develop it. I would hope that as they voted it down, they had an alternative to say we're going to build something else. But they have no other developers that's come in to say they're going to pick up that piece of land, and if it goes on for a long period of time, then all I could suspect is that Inglewood is voted against their self-interest because of their real negative view of what Walmart brings to
But
the
Chief,
community.
you stated on record many times that, you're not really for big box stores that take away jobs from,
It's not me.
that's not you.
No. I've been very supportive of developing businesses that bring in jobs. We happen to have a Walmart in the 8th District. It's brought in 500 jobs. It brings in just under 1 million people a month into a shopping center that was getting ready to go under. And so we have really no negatives about big box, because we also realize that what do you do with these big shopping centers that have these big boxes, and Sears or Montgomery Ward or May Company or Robinson May disappear out of your community? What do you do with a 100-square-foot store? You can't make them all swap meets. So you have to bring in something that serves the public. And what we found in our shopping center is that for 5 years, not one retailer came forward. We had Target build on our outskirts in Culver City and in Inglewood. We see Nordstrom's build in the north part of the city. None of them would come south of the Santa Monica Freeway. We get a Walmart in, and people want us to abandon them as a retailer because they don't like some of their employment practices. I believe certainly that Walmart has to clean up some of those image issues and some of those practical issues, but I don't think they're any different than any other company that hires 1 million employees, that they have some personnel issues. But I don't think our mission is to go and tell 500 people you shouldn't have a job in the middle of the south part of the city that brings forth a following that is enhanced in the entire shopping center.
What about this Playa Vista issue? Is it moving forward the way it's supposed to move forward? Is Soberoff doing the right thing, or what's going on there?
I've been out there several times. It's a very impressive site. They have, I think, the housing. They have every level of income. They also just brought in some major businesses, again, building a business next to where you live, which you can just walk to work, which cuts down the traffic. That is going through a great deal of public review. It's been downsized. At this time, I believe the next phase is the commercial aspect. And so with all that going on, it's a city within the city. You're going to be able to live in Playa Vista and not actually go off the grounds. If you work there and you can shop there, it's basically a community.
So you support the
itself.
concept, basically.
I support the concept, particularly when we go back and visualize what was there. And what we had was wetlands that were unimproved, and now we have thousands of people living in first-class housing, working at first-class businesses, and a commercial business that's coming forth that generates millions of dollars of revenue for the city of Los Angeles.
You gonna fix the traffic and the roads on Lincoln?
Well, you know, the traffic and the roads on Lincoln are part of our problem throughout the city. We knew 15 years ago what the overflow was going to be, but and the reasons I believe that our residential areas function so poorly, we need humps and bumps in the street, and we need all kinds of stop sign, is because our major streets don't work, because we haven't paid attention enough to making sure that we have adequate lanes on the street, that they're well manicured in the sense of taken care of, that our street lights are synchronized, and we've not convinced our general public that public transportation is okay. Those are kinds of things that need to make it a viable city, that we have to convince people that public transportation is inexpensive, clean, on time, and safe. And we will then be able to get people out of their cars, and you won't have 3,000 cars on the San Diego freeway going northbound in the morning, all with one passenger.
Let's
I'm
go.
gonna
Let's
jump
wait.
around.
There's
Ron,
I'll let you go in for right after this one, because this is so important. The LAX issue is the big deal, and it's one of those issues that you have disagreed with the mayor on.
That's right.
You think it's that his direction is wrong, and you think your direction is right.
That's right.
So let's get into that, and how. If you wouldn't mind, I'm asking for you to be indulgent of us, but you know you do have other people that are in this race. You've got Villaraigosa and Alarcon and Hertzberg, but where do you differ from all of those guys on this LAX issue, and how on the expansion of it, and how many passengers do you want to have at the end of the day?
Well, I think that I don't disagree that the 78 million map is a good goal. Also, you also realize that it's not within your control, because FAA can increase that at any time. You don't have authority over that. But I think the 78 million is a good goal. I think also an understanding that the LAX represents about 500,000 jobs. So it's a revenue stream that we should not tamper with without some due consideration. But I believe that the issues that I disagree with the mayor's plan on LAX is that I don't believe that we should be going forward with this master plan. This master plan is based on dated information well over 10 years old. We've basically are salvaging something that would not be in our interest. We are looking to spend $9 billion on a plan that in many instances does not serve the public. And one of the big features that I disagree with is this Manchester Square, this universal terminal that everyone comes in. And although people say it's part of the safety, we view it as a major target. What would be the best place to go to if you wanted to harm people, a large number of them, is go to the one location that you're mandating they all go through. That people mover that would take you to the airport is another area that creates some major safety issues. The lack of a drop-off in the internal part of the airport, major convenience issue that will drive passengers away. I believe that there's certain things that have to be done at the airport, and I think we have to deny that plan as it's currently stated, because I don't think under Misikowski's plan that you can approve it and just hold some pieces out of it. I think eventually, if you get 8 votes, any piece in there can be built. So I think you deny it, and basically you spend a little more time and money on the planning, you bring things up to date, but the pieces you have to deal with are both runways need to be repaired. The south runway has to be enlarged or spread apart to allow the bigger planes to come in. Bradley Terminal has to be redone. You can reduce some of the gates there, make bigger gates, but Bradley's got to be done because of these international flights with these big planes. You also need to ensure you have the parking inside the terminal. For safety and convenience, consolidating the rental car location is important. But also what's important is to bring the Green Line closer to the LAX so that people can actually travel to Los Angeles, get on a Green Line directly out of the airport, and go to any place that rail takes them in the city of LA, whether they're going to Universal Studios, going to Long Beach, whether they're going all the way out to Fontana. All that can be done in the rail system.
Why don't they have a system that interlocks on rail or tram to all the different airports in the whole region? Why is there ever been a plan for that to
Well,
happen?
there's a plan now that's being studied by SCAG that talks about having a high-speed rail go all the way out to Ontario, and that is being studied. The real dynamics, I think, until the city of LA comes to grips with running its 3 airports as one system, and then we are able to pull together the regional airports under one authority, we will continue to have these competing interests as it relates to airports. But we need a regional authority so that when decisions are made, you can make sense of them as to why an Orange County airport is doing it this way and how it impacts then the Ontario airport or the Palmdale airport or the Van Nuys airport. Can you then move general aviation to one airport and not have it at another? Can you move the cargo and large numbers to one airport that does not have passengers? Those are all the kinds of things you can do from a region that impacts a variety of areas. We're very successful at using that approach for traffic. When we look at SCAG, that they deal with the 5 county regions and develop traffic plans for those regions. We need the same thing for air traffic.
Well, you know, the LAX has always been the pivotal airport for the West Coast, and it just seems to me that whoever is elected mayor better really take a strong lead to make sure that this is the best facility and the most convenient, as you mentioned, facility that's available and can be had and set up some sort of connections between all these different airports so that people can get around to. People that fly in perhaps to Orange County need to take a commuter flight from Los Angeles, and they need to get there quick and without trams and taking time on our freeways too.
One of the things is that I think all that's important, but you're not going to get that kind of consideration as long as all the airports work for themselves independently. In fact, even the cooperation of the LAX airport with Ontario or Palmdale isn't as good as it should be, because they're not run as a system of airports, they're run as 3 different airports. So a lot of that has to be done and can be done by creating a regional plan that has all of that impact concerns in it. But what's most important to me is having a regional authority that makes decisions for all airports so that you are now paying attention to the 5 county regions as opposed to one airport versus another.
Larry.
I was going to ask a question about the airport, but I have 2 that relate to it. On the November ballot will be a measure called LA County Public Safety and Homeland Security Sales Tax Initiative. And the authors claim that the city of LA will receive $168 million that'll fund 1,500 to 1,800 new police officers. However, if approved, this initiative is going to increase sales tax by half a cent.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I have a number of opinions. I support that. I think that at the current state that we're in budgetary resources, the fact that it may be the only source of revenue available, certainly we need to enhance our law enforcement strategy because of the terrorism and just day-to-day police work. But I think also we have to be realistic to realize that the public has gotten a pretty good record on what they'll vote for. They'll vote for infrastructure issues. They have done well with libraries. They've done well with schools. They've done well with sewers. But we've not done well with personnel costs. And so I don't think we can be naive to say it's going to be an automatic. It's going to be a tough battle to get 66.2% or 2/3. But on the other hand, it's somewhat of an indication just this week that this ballot initiative has been out there for a number of months, and it did not secure this overwhelming number of signatures. So those are going to be some key issues of how do you now make it a reality, because getting 64% or 65% is not enough.
Let me do a follow-up with this. And I guess the question is, has anybody in the city council gone to Washington and asking for some backfill for all the extra expenses that we've incurred since 9/11 in providing the police security to have LAX be a safe place for us to fly in and out of?
Yeah, there's been a lot of communication with the federal government. The police department certainly gets backfill as it relates to overtime. Every time there's a code orange, there's certainly money forthcoming. The airport gets reimbursed. But the real dynamics is that your funding is reimbursable generally if it's an emergency. So that creates at minimum a cash flow problem for you, because you might spend several $1 million in overtime this month but not get it back for 2 to 3 months or at the earliest. But what we can't ignore is the day-to-day operations, not just when there's a code orange or when there's some catastrophe that we're all gearing up for. The day-to-day resources are equally important to look at how you might put resources in, put more officers on the street. But it's also important in how we're using those personnel. My concern or reluctance early on about the initiative is I don't believe we get the best usage of our personnel in LAPD by giving them a 3-day work week. We can increase the number of officers on our streets by 20 to 30% by putting them on 8-hour shifts. So it's hard in some regard to go to the public and say, tax yourself, and not be able to assure them that we're using the resources to the best of our ability now.
When did they start that 3-day work week?
It's been in since December of 2001, and I think it was implemented most of 2002.
What are they doing? Checking after the fire department? They're trying to act like the fire department?
Very
What?
close, except there's not as many cement mixers or trucks with pool equipment as there is at the fire department. Because fire department works 12 days a month. Police department on 3-day work week is in the same boat.
And they all get 3 at 50. They get that 3% at 50, right?
Well, yeah, the pensions have changed. They're even better now. At 33 years, you get 90%.
Yeah.
And
And if
so-
you work extra hard and you happen to fall down on the job that last month before you can go out on disability,
Yeah,
and you
well-
can do the whole thing.
Well, fire department personnel, I don't know how many of them, almost all of them have injured themselves seriously during their career. So many of those pensions are very legitimate, that these guys have fallen through a roof or hurt themselves. Some of them in the police department I used to always be concerned with. For years we had people that would retire and immediately they'd find their hearing was decreased. And you said, well, that happens with everybody that's 30 years older than they were when they came on the police department. But I think when you look at the fire, you're talking about some very serious and often very visible type of injuries that they've incurred. When you start getting sometime in those stress issues, some of those require some extra attention. But physical ailments, the fire department, I think when they say they've been injured, it's fully documented.
Chief Parks, you know what? I got to. I'll let you have it just a second. I just got to tell you this, though. Okay.
Is it his
We've
camera?
we've
Is his
given.
camera?
Yeah. Hey,
We do this all the time, but go on, Ron.
You know, I'm just going to tell you, we've given you enough softballs to answer
Okay.
now. We're going to start asking you some serious hard
All right.
questions now, and one of them is one that you haven't answered to the best of your ability.
Okay.
We believe that. We know you've got more ability to do this.
Okay.
And one of them is that one of your detractors has said, or several, that you haven't been very forthcoming about the Rampart issue,
Okay.
and that you didn't really want to go and testify on against the cops in Rampart or what you knew about it. So you're going to have to face that during this election, whether it's us or the next guy. So we'd sure like to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, first of all, I think anyone that would say that Rampart was not thoroughly investigated isn't aware of what happened in Rampart. I discovered Rampart within 6 months of becoming chief. We arrested Rafael Perez within a year, and from there on, it was the insistence of LAPD to ensure we got the information. We made it public through a 380-page book called The Board of Inquiry. We put it on the website. We advised everyone in the public. We identified the first 115 people that were in jail inappropriately. I was the only chief of police I can remember that went to the DA and demanded prosecutions of officers. Also, that we terminated or disciplined everybody internally. The thing that I refused to participate in is after 5 years of Rampart, the current police commission decided they wanted to reinvestigate it. And so they came up with a green ribbon committee or something that said, would you come and interview? I said, once you look at the Board of Inquiry and the grand jury report and the district attorneys, that we've had 2 of them look at it, 2 U.S. attorneys, the commission has looked at it already with 120 to 30 people that created a report called the Independent Commission. And then when it's all said and done, if you want to go back and look at it again, everything I have to say is in the file. I don't need to be interviewed again about Rampart because I've said everything I can possibly say about it.
Let me ask you this: is there anything left to discover about Rampart? And is there anything? How long is this consent decree going to go on, and the oversight by the federal government?
Well, first of all, I think there's always things to learn when you have a negative, but I think that the things that were identified that need to be worked on, I implemented about 80 to 90% of those before I left the police department. 60 to 70% of the consent decree are things that were discovered by the Board of Inquiry that were implemented. So there's just a regurgitation of what the city's already
Chief Bernard
identified.
Parks, we're out of time on The Cutting Edge, and thank you so much for joining us today on The Cutting Edge.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure.